They say the humidity's supposed to go right up.
Wonderful.
Well, I know Ginger won't be here, so I'll call to order this meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, July 16th, 2019. Peter, I was not able to bring up the June 4th minutes, only the June 18th. Everybody else, has everybody seen the June 4th minutes? Okay. My problem then. I'm sorry, approval of the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any revisions to be made, or do we have an approval for the June 4th draft minutes? Motion, please.
Second.
Oops.
Just give me 5 seconds. I thought I saw there was maybe it's on the 18th. Oh, here it is. It just says, it says Mr. Pronk, who's talking about the wind farm, and then the next paragraph is, it's Mr. So it was still Pronk talking, so. It said, Mr. lamented that there is no plan for the removal of the turbines if they fail.
Okay.
I think you ought to just throw Pronk in there.
Anything else?
No, not for me.
How about the June 18th minutes?
I don't think I had any issues. No, I didn't.
Do we have a motion to approve both June 14th and June 18th, 2019 minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just in case none of you or anybody's not aware, the third annual Harbor Forum is this Thursday. Is that at 4:30?
Mm-hmm.
At the Great Harbor Yacht Club. It's free, so please attend. There should be some good information there. Sheila, hi, what can you tell us?
Summer?
Yeah, I know you're busy. How's, navigation in the harbor is good?
Yep. Bulbs was dredged, looks good, marked it. Thought we had one spot that wasn't done right, but I just tweaked the buoys a little bit, but you got 6 feet at low, so that's excellent for there. Yeah, we're just maintaining,
No disasters, spills, issues of any kind like that. That's good to hear. I see the, how far, I noticed lifeguard stands at Nobadeer, quite a ways down the beach.
we added a stand there. For this year, because we usually have 5 or 6 lifeguards there, so having 2 stands is just better. That's our busiest beach.
Mm-hmm.
We've been averaging about 1,500 to 2,000 on hot days like this at November.
1,500 to 2,000 people?
Oh my God.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That was that used to be the amount of people that were there for the 4th of July party.
Yeah, that moved to 7,000. So now we're back to like 1,500 to 2,000 on Nobadeer, and then Surfside obviously is the next biggest one. That's right around 1,000 to 1,200 there.
How about the space or lack thereof at Cisco? It doesn't seem to be coming.
We're averaging about 500 there, so they just are really spread out, and it's very difficult for us because the stand has to be up, like kind of in the parking lot a little bit, and then they just have to run down and have to keep the zone clear in front of them, because the stand in the coffin locker with all the gear in it wouldn't get soaked at high tide there. So yeah, lifeguards are doing good. We got recertified as, by the USLA. Again, doing good for another 3 years without certification. Just, we're on patrol. We've increased the hours of the headhunter. We've increased our office hours from 7 to 7. So the headhunter's on the water for 12 hours a day. I understand that there was some question about, that we should be doing more. I don't know how much more we can be doing, than 12 hours a day. I can promise you that no other community in the Cape and Islands is doing 12 hours a day underway. So.
A lot of sewage.
I haven't heard anything as far
I
as
think Mr. Fonzuta can be the first to tell you that ever since he was running the show, we've done more than any other place in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
More than any other, 150,000 gallons a year. And this year, I think it's probably gonna be even more than that.
The whole basin's doing 100,000 and we're doing 25 to 35.
I mean, you can't, like she said, you can't be underway any more than that.
12
just
hours
can't.
a day. Like, I've talked to every other harbor master and
No.
they're just like,
They're lucky if they get underway 2-3 hours a day, if that.
yeah, and most of them are down to 2 or 3 days a week.
Oh, yeah. I know, and a
We're
weekend.
12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So I don't, when I hear the comments of why aren't we doing more, I don't know how much more. Because the comments come from the same people that don't wanna give us any more staff and don't wanna, do anything like that. So, I mean, if they wanna buy me another boat and buy me another 10 people, I'll be out there. I'm not gonna promise 24 hours a day, cause I think pumping shit in the dark might be dangerous, but 7 AM to 7 PM is.
That's just.
Sheila. We applaud your efforts and
I know
the
you guys do, but it's just sometimes difficult, listening to,
Yes.
they don't say it to me. I ended up we had a intoxicated boater that night that smashed into a couple of things at the town pier, so I had to leave the meeting. So someone was covering for me and they bombarded this other person with, how many gallons does that average per boat in the,
And just so the board knows, I don't mean to interject, Michelle, but what, they keep a daily running log. She can tell you on any given day how much sewage she has pumped, not only for the day, but year to date since July 1. So, and you look at some of the numbers, 600, 500, 600, 500. Yeah, there's a few 10s and 12s thrown in there. But, 600 gallons, 700 gallons. Some of these boats have 5,000 gallon tank holding capacities. You have to go back 4 times just to get them to a suitable level.
And now that we're making everybody do their gray water as well, which we have for a few years, that's more. So,
what's the capacity of the headhunter?
550 gallons.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is 3 times what we started with in 1993.
Yeah.
The boat was spending more time at the dock pumping out than it was underway, so we built ahead of it. And the state covered most of the cost. I mean, it's not a cost issue. It's hours and people.
Time.
Yeah.
There haven't been any moorings added to the mooring field. Are we still harbor?
We're capped by the Army Corps of Engineers, so we can't add any, and they like to accuse us of that too. They're not, we haven't added any. I know that the plan is, I think, still in play for, the new concrete docks in the fall, and the repairs that we made to them, that we did by ourselves. We did these in-house, like 3 of us. Added the floats, did all that stuff. Last year it cost you guys $50,000 when we had somebody come in and do it. We did them this year ourselves, and people are very happy with the dock.
Good.
There's temporary lighting up. There is no power because when we took the docks, the floaters apart last year, we had to pull some out and we had to wet store some of them, but we had to disconnect all the power all the way through. And for one season, we weren't gonna rerun the whole thing. So we money to get new concrete docks, do some dredging, and do some, upgrades to like the sewage pipe and water lines and stuff like that under the fixed pier. And also, we're a new building.
Has the contractor for the pier work been chosen?
No.
Has it been out to bid?
It's gonna go out to bid, but it has
Alright.
to go soon. I'm begging for it to happen because it's a 26 lead time for these concrete docks. We gotta get it in here.
And will you be limited by the winter flounder?
I think for pile, right?
For dredging.
Yeah, for dredging.
You won't have to for the docks. The key there is, the dredging is new, never been dredged before. The docks are in place already, so it's on an existing permit, so you're just basically replacing in kind, so you're safe on it.
Cause they said that they can put just a screen around it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were talking to Tara about that a couple of weeks ago. It's really important to do.
Is there anything in particular, a reason why it hasn't gone out to bid yet?
Well,
That-
I don't know, some of those financial rules that they have about when they got the money and where they get the money from. But I am staying on top of the people and saying we better go. This needs
But-
to get moving.
Is the
and- But I'm being told that we're on track.
Is the engineering work done? So it can go out to bid?
It's ready to go.
Oh, okay, all right.
We're ready, and
Yeah.
we got the money in town meeting.
Yeah, right.
So we're ready. I don't know whether I don't know whether you can't spend it till July 1st.
Oh, fiscal year, right, yeah,
So,
right.
maybe we're not that far.
They
It
put-
feels like
I think they had to cobble the money together, so some of it had to,
wait till July
Yeah.
1.
I think that might be the answer. But
What about the bid process for the building?
And I know that they chose an architect, and I think right now they're still trying to figure out, whether they're gonna build it right where the old one is, right where the one now is, or they're gonna build it just like inches next door. So that's the only thing they keep talking to me about. I just keep saying, when do we have to move out? Because if we're moving out in September, I wanna move out in August while I've got some bodies to help me carry this stuff. Be stuck with the staff too, when I got,
Do they have a temporary location for you?
I don't know, that's what
Yeah.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
'Cause if
Wow.
We're going in the fall, let's do it in August. I mean, let's get the big stuff out. When I've got young, strong bodies to carry this stuff for us.
Well, if there's any encouragement we can help with,
I'll let you know, yeah, for sure.
is any of this on Chuck Larson's desk?
I don't know.
Strategic. Well, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Right now,
I mean, we all know how the timing goes, and the season to work starts in September, and all the everything should be in order by then, so that
yeah, and I think.
Ample time.
I think we'll be on track.
yeah.
and to Sheila's point about moving out, when we built the buildings that are now almost 30 years old, we had just bought the laundromat across the street, and we moved over there. That's now the finance department, so you don't have that luxury anymore. It worked for us for the construction period because we were literally right across the street. So you don't have that luxury this time. So, you know,
I don't know if they're gonna put a trailer.
A
down there
trailer.
Or what they're gonna do, but.
in the parking lot.
Well, the fire station may be available at that time. Who knows? We don't have to get into that really, I guess. But Sheila, later we're going to be talking about goals and objectives, and I was recently thinking about something. It was kind of looking at N Magazine and the Trashin' Show, making me think of the Coir bags, and I'm just wondering, have you had any incidents with mariners or marine life with Coir bags
He's talking about,
those burlap, but you know, when they use the
Oh,
burlap,
those
we
things.
did years ago.
Yeah, we used to when,
We used to go hurt them up all the time.
but I haven't,
I don't think anybody's using them right now.
Oh no,
Use 'em.
that all winter long there was a truck coming over.
These were the ones that came loose from Ratner
Mm-hmm.
and came around through the
Those-
cut.
the-
Those were enormous. They were, you know.
Well,
the size-
those were geotextile
yeah, they were
bags.
big. I don't.
no, we haven't, I
Yeah.
haven't been called in years.
Okay.
the Concom is supposed to, Andy's talking about the ones that are brown and the holes in the bags, the mesh are like, you know.
It's like
they're
jute
that.
all rolled up.
Oh, it's like, oh, I see.
And
Thank you, Sheila. All right.
Thanks.
and they're designed to release sand during a storm, and the Conservation Commission had said, used to require people who installed them in front of their houses to weave a thread.
They had to be tethered.
They had a thread that was there was a color that, and a tag that was, so that if the things broke loose and it ended up at Great Point, you could say, well, that belongs to whoever.
Oh.
So you haven't had any issues with those?
No, not at all.
Andy, where are they using them?
Well, a lot of them are along the eastern shore at the toe of Sankaty, Sconset Bluff, but I take a morning waterfront cruise every day, and there's been a truck coming over all winter long. It's like a car carrying truck that has them stacked up on it like a pyramid. On the door it says Netco, and I saw it going up Cliff Road and towards Nantucket. I don't know whether they're being used on the northern shore. But I mean that.
Kokomo, too.
Pocomo is where they're, I've seen them in Pocomo.
And I'm just, we haven't had any major storm events to break these things loose, and I appreciate, the Concom's efforts and what they're doing, but they're, just trying to discourage from one thing and use these instead, and I'm wondering if altogether, it needs to be thought out more as far as marine life and safety to mariners, because these bags, if I found one in the Cod of the Bay still fully intact, and all I could think of is if a boat hung up on that, it would be a surprise for you at the least, and if they loosen up and come apart so that they're more of like a net, now you're looking at marine life getting caught up in it also, and just wondering if it's something that we should be discussing and adding our 2 cents to if we feel necessary. Where there have not been any major storm events, none of these things are breaking loose yet, but I think it's something.
Mr. Chairman, I'm out to Smith's Point a fair amount with my business, and there are lots and lots of piles of this stuff out on Smith's Point on the south shore of it, in clumps, mixed in with, grass and
sand.
roots and
From Ratner.
no, I'm not talking about the black plastic bags. I'm talking about the coir.
Oh, the Corbin.
And mixed in with fishing line and everything, just these big huge clumps of trash.
Well, I didn't want to have this a full evening discussion because this is Sheila's
Here,
time.
If you run into these things, would you give us a call? Yeah, give one.
Or just note it so that.
We can light them up.
Yeah, but I'm curious, as to, because we do a lot of the beach cleanup, where should I be
Oh,
sending
they're-
them?
Smith's Point, all the way out at the end.
Can you drive out there yet?
You can drive out, well, not because of birds you can't,
Right,
but you gotta watch it when you get past the inlet. The inlet that's in front of Alan Warden's house where the solar panels are, and where it comes together and the dunes are right there. You gotta make sure you go low tide,
Yeah.
because after they open the beach up to the birds, I don't know how people are getting out there, even at low tide.
Isn't there an inner road?
There is, but it's a sore spot for me because people just drive all over the dunes.
Yes.
No, if you happen to see, or if you run into some,
yeah,
please let us know.
definitely if they're in the water.
Are you aware of where the applications are, Peter?
Applications.
Where they're installing the installations?
79 Baxter Road, and then his neighbor to the south, and then there's the Pocomo 8, which is 8 neighbors on the east side of Pocomo Point, where they've done rolls instead of making bags of sand, and they put those anchor them against the bluff, and instead of ascending, and then they cover them with sand and put beach grass on them, and that part of the harbor doesn't get the action that the east side of the island gets. But even though the fetch is really short, the waves can stack up really close, and you get the nor'easters, they get pounded. So sometimes they all get.
Anything else, board members, for Sheila?
No, sir.
Sheila, anything else for us?
I had a question. Probably a sore spot for you, but what's up with that boat that's beached down there, Quays, that's still there?
Nice little spot for me. It's Marty McGowan's kid is in rehab, and they worked it out with the owner of the house, property owner,
They're leaving it there until.
The kid gets.
get something done there to get it out. But that's on private property, so there's nothing I can really
Okay.
do about it. We leave it between the boat owner and the property owner.
Okay, just wondering.
Best answer.
Oh, that's a good question, because I've had a couple people ask me about that also, and also one person made mention of a boat in Fourth Bend that they felt somebody had it beached and they were painting the bottom. This was several weeks ago.
Yeah, I know exactly about. He's no longer on income.
And the boat?
He was told to take the boat and go to the vineyard. He's no longer welcome.
And
You'll remember exactly who it is. It's the same guy that beached it in
Take up camping.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
he's been run out of here.
Wow. Step back in time.
Thanks, Sheila.
Guys, have a good night.
And you as well, Sheila. Thank you. I've not heard from Jeff or Tara. Natural Resources report. Not seeing either of them. Move forward to public comment. Having no public here. Old business. Goals and objectives.
All I did was, because I couldn't figure out how to make the grid expand. What I wanted to do was go through all of these and update them in terms of where we were, and then.
It's a good idea.
But I just gotta do some more work in Acrobat and figure out how to do that. So you can see in my lame attempt on the last page just lists what I pulled out of the minutes as our goals and objectives. And if anybody sees that there's something missing, let me know and I'll write it down and put it in there. But
Are we gonna add these to these?
well, this is
Prioritize?
this is added to the list. Andy, the list is 1 through whatever. Are they lists of, I can't remember, did we list these as priorities or just this is number 1, this is number 2, number 3? And so if
I don't think they're in any particular order. The priority levels labeled after the description.
right, so what I would probably do is figure out how the grid works and add these and the ones that I have in the third page in a more formal way and strip out all the priority levels. So get rid of them and then take the people's names out who don't exist on the board anymore and give it back to everybody. And then we
Then can we prioritize?
then we prioritize and say, okay, for instance, the scalloping waiter safety. Well, that's high, but Sheila took care of that, right? She put up signs, and there was a video produced, and so that could probably go, right?
Yes.
So, eel gas restoration. I don't know about the NOAA grants, but since the Land Council is doing harvesting and transplanting, you could say that would be low priority. Well, it's high priority, but it's being worked on. So,
Well, and how other people interpret these priority levels. Somebody commented last night at the Shellfish Association meeting why a certain one was only considered medium, and I hadn't looked at this yet, and so hadn't realized that you had printed out, our old one, and that I did mention to this person that we were simply going over them and revising it.
Yeah.
But they were wondering why it was a medium and not a high. I forget which detail that it was, but it's really neither here nor there, except that if we're going to talk about these tonight, I don't see a reason why we can't put a priority level on it
sure.
as well.
Sure. Yep, we can do that.
And if we want to revise it again next week, that's fine also. But I mean, I've got a couple of things I want to add to here, crossing off what we don't need on here. Is wonderful, and let's mark it up and get the revision going.
Okay.
The eelgrass restoration will be spoken about Thursday night, I'm sure.
Yep.
And it is it's a pet of the Land Council that we support. Hopefully it works as long as we have quality water to support the eelgrass, then certainly, it would be nice to see the project continue, but as they have told us, if the water if the quality isn't there, then the eelgrass isn't going to survive. So we need to step back and work on water quality, which, brings me back to fertilizer for the most part, because we see so many of these lawns, not just green, but blue. So I'm amazed at how many blue lawns I'm seeing on the waterfront, and I'm just concerned that I know there's been a lot done in the fertilizer end of things, and that was another thing that Fritz was involved with, I believe. So he was kind of a liaison to us, to what the health department was implementing with the fertilizer regulation. If we had some more information about, maybe we should talk to Roberto, what direction he's moving with. Is he expecting to do more? Is it stay the same and hope for the best? Because that's a tough thing to police. And I guess we can't ban it outright altogether, but it's possible there's some legislation that's being pushed so that we can regulate it more than the state allows. That is something that Roberto has mentioned recently. And here again, maybe we'll find out more on that Thursday night also. But I don't even know if fertilizer was on this. And I know it's, fertilizer regulations and use in the watershed, public education and enforcement. It was high priority. DOH Fertilizer Advisory Committee.
Did I hear Tara say in the minutes, the last meeting, I think, that the Shellfish Management Plan implementation had solved it, that they're all done, that they've put it all into effect?
No, it's they're
Or is it
gonna do an update of the Shellfish Management Plan as part of the update
Okay.
of the harbor plan, and then we'll revisit the implementation again.
So there'll be an implementation committee for that updated version, which includes those two plans.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we should just go down the list.
Mm-hmm.
So for that one, at the top, we should just put that as maybe low because it's being handled, or should we just take it off there altogether?
I would just, my opinion, I'd take it off altogether right now, just because they're, A, to whittle the list down, but B, both of those are gonna be updated by, at the same time. So
Okay.
you're gonna, I guess my point is you're gonna need another implementation committee like we had before for the harbor plan at the same time. So I say take it off and we sit on both implementation committees as the plan, once the plan's been approved.
So I guess you just have to look at each one of these and say, is there anything more we need to do to make this happen? And if not, then it shouldn't be on the list, right?
Right now, right.
Right.
We'll address it when it's brought forward.
Okay, all right, well, we'll take that one off then.
And as far as the regulations are concerned, I mean, don't we believe that there's a pretty high involvement with notifying people and telling people about the regulations now, or do you feel that
Number 2.
that's not, or do you feel that that's not sufficient right now?
Yeah, well,
I mean, do you have anybody complaining about?
no one complaining other than the usual complainers.
Right.
The-
I wouldn't take it off, but I'd certainly, if we're gonna prioritize, I'd certainly move it towards the back. It's one of those things, I think it's just gonna be ongoing forever. You're gonna have more people coming to the island who've never shellfished before in their life. And there's a steep learning curve there for them. You're not gonna get a bunch of new people into the commercial market. Those guys are pretty well, they understand what they're supposed to do and not supposed to do.
As long as they don't change, because then you got all the permanent licenses, the senior licenses, where they would miss out on any changes to regulations.
That's a good point. Just because we're older doesn't mean we're smarter.
Yeah, you have to pay attention.
For sure.
Right.
Well, that would be a group that would be helped by being reminded of waiter safety.
Right, and that's right.
Because we don't get anything, we just go scallop and they don't really tell us anything, but if you're getting a new license, you're gonna get some notification
paperwork,
of
yeah.
things you might be
Right.
told.
Well, then my suggestion there is that when the shellfish wardens are doing their, especially in the first 2 weeks of October, they're checking on that and handing out that information at that time. That's the way to disseminate that. They're not gonna go to the Marine Department. Well, first of all, they don't go to the Marine Department anymore, they come here. There should be some of the waiter safety handouts. We can make that happen.
Let's do a follow-up on that
Yeah,
and
we
see
can
that.
make the waiter safety handouts available here at the public safety facility. But then the shellfish warden, that's the way to do that. You slide up alongside them in the boat and you go, you know what? You're gonna drown. Here's the deal. And handing them a piece of paper when they're chest deep with their push rake isn't probably a very good idea, but they'll take it, hopefully they'll take it and shove it in their waders. But that's when you gotta target those folks.
Do we publish annual closed, open and closed sections of reclaiming? Do we have any?
If you have a,
condemned section?
for areas?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to publish it.
Right, and is it available here? Can we come to the building and grab it, or
It's
do we
on
know?
your license, what the season is. You get a piece
No,
of paper.
No, I don't mean the season time.
You're talking about seasonal
Open and
closures
closed, yeah, seasonal
or
closures,
Water quality
right,
closures?
exactly.
It's a good point. I don't know. Let me find out that.
Or
It
just
occurred to me, because
area
we
closures.
just stopped clamming the harbor, because I won't clam there in the summer because of gray water.
Right.
But I'm sure there are condemned area, closed areas for the summer,
There are, and
for boat traffic and for a lot of stuff.
Nantucket used to be closed and we got it back open, but you'll end up with closures in town when you have a heavy rainfall.
Mhm.
They're usually a 3-day closure, but that has to be published in the newspaper.
right.
Because that's a state closure.
Right,
But that's a good point. What's open, what's not.
and when?
For
right.
instance, case in point is from Brant Point to Boston Avenue on Monomoy. That's a historic closure since the 40s. So, but that's a good point. I'll have to find out.
I have a friend in Clayton.
Well, Boston Avenue is way down in the corner. It's way down, by where that boat rack is, by Gershner's house.
Oh, the first boat.
Tight in the corner. So that's where Boston Avenue is. The only reason I bring that up is Boston Avenue, that closure also, when other closures happen, that's the reference point. So it's kind of, you have to know where that is, so to speak.
You know, I don't know if,
So this probably ought to stay on, is the point. I think the point, this ought to stay on, maybe go to a lower priority, but it should stay on the list probably.
Right, most definitely.
well, and if there could be a tag along with this, I mean, communication with fishermen in general, you know, a lot of times, especially with scallopers, you know, they kind of keep to themselves. They don't like to share information. And this is something that Tara actually brought up years ago when I first got on board here. She wanted to kind of tool around the harbor during the season, pull up next to guys and, you know, see how they were doing, take a look at what they're pulling in, see what's on the bottom and what's on the culling board. But, you know, guys get intimidated.
Well,
And there needs to, if we could be the buffer between this, you know, reach out to the fishermen somehow that we're simply concerned about the health of the harbor and we want to see what's down there. And
well, we did that for years, and they have to understand, what the fishermen need to remember or understand is that she's not an enforcement agent. She's there just to see what the hell's on the culling board. She's not there. And let me put it this way: you can't slide up along one of these guys and set him down for a day because he's got seed while she's wanting to look at the culling board. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a timing issue. You slide up along there and you say, "Hey, I got Tara with me. She wants to see what you got on the culling board." But you can't. Again, it's common sense. It sounds like common sense, but it's not.
right.
So it's to your point. We need to be that buffer and make sure that they understand that in that her capacity, she doesn't care. I mean, she's certainly going to be angry if they got a bunch of seed on the culling board. Don't get me wrong, but she's there to see what's on the bottom and what's going on and how is the tow going and how long you've been out here and, you know.
Well, if the seed are in the boxes, that's the issue. If they're on the culling board, hopefully they're getting pushed back over. So,
The
In a good
fishermen
way.
are
You do
more accepting of Tara than they have been of other shellfish biologists, and trusting. And since she's not enforcement, then they can, you know, she'd have better shot at looking at catches than JC. You know, if it's the warden coming down the wharf, you're doing what you can to keep your box not looking like it's you know, mounded and you're trying to hide your seed or whatever you're trying to do. And all Tara wants to know is, you know, what does the broodstock look like?
Yeah, where's the codium and you know, I
Where
mean,
are the predators and
years ago, Tracy Curley was the biologist, rest her soul, and we were short-staffed, and we made her a warden. It created. She was beat up.
yeah.
I mean, it was a bad decision that we made, and I'll take full responsibility for it. But you've got enough staff now that you don't have to do that. Okay, and Peter's exactly right. I think the fishermen. She works really well with the fishermen. She's been here for over 10 years now. You know, I think that.
well, I don't think she ever went out and did that. And I just want to see, you know, more open communication and acceptance. It's hard to do with the fishermen, and if it took one of us to actually be along with Tara to help this happen, then
willing to help.
What she did do for a couple of years in a row, I remember, during recreational season, is she'd go out in a kayak and she'd paddle around to the recreational scalpers and look in their baskets and talk to them and get a sense of what she was seeing. I thought that was great.
It's
Yeah, because you can see what kind of muck they're pulling up in the basket, and then,
And it's non-threatening. It's all about personalities. I could do with my personality. I could do what we're talking about. Other people can't. So with her, if one of us went along with her, just say, hey, you know, we're out here just taking a look.
All right, well, if we can, if everybody's okay with broadening the description of communication to communication between this board, natural resources, and the fishermen, I don't want to dilute, the initial basis of this by doing that. If you feel it should be a separate,
But they've done brochures and texts and photos. They've done, I think they've done a good job. We just need to keep it up.
well, that's the other thing, a follow-up to make sure it's happening every year.
I would say that what we were just discussing would be a separate item. This one has the word regulation in it.
Right.
That's what we want to avoid.
True. Very good. Yes.
Rules.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe the addition of one bit.
So general communication on conditions, so that, to help in research.
Right.
Dave, are you in here often, Mr. Franzuto, in this building? I mean, would you be able to, do a follow-up to see if they're issuing the waiter safety warning annually?
And I'll find out about where there is closure. The closure should be posted. See, there again, now I digress, but when everybody went to the Marine Department, the closures were posted there, and you could point to them and say, you can't go from here to here, you can't do this, you can't do that, because of water quality issues. But we need to find out how that's being disseminated now, and maybe it needs to be put in the paper periodically, maybe once a month, a quarter of a page. It shows the shellfish closure areas. So let me tell you, the byproduct, or the real reason that you're doing this, the real reason that we're even talking about this, God forbid somebody gets sick. Okay, they're not going to get sick from eating scallops, because you don't eat the abductor. You only eat the abductor muscle. So that's why when you have a shellfish closure because of contamination, scallops are never closed. Okay, but let somebody go dig a bushel of clams someplace in a closed area and then get sick. I just put on a raw bar for St. Paul's Fair. The hoops that I jumped through to get 600 coags and 300 oysters, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, I had to swear on my mother's grave that I would keep the tags and do this and do that and everything else. The stuff came from Duxbury, came from Chatham, came from here. But God forbid somebody gets sick, because then they're going to be sitting right there in that chair. Or God forbid it's their family is sitting right there in that chair and say, hey, didn't you guys tell anybody that you couldn't dig clams there? Grandpa's always dug clams there. I can hear it.
Well, it's that Natural Resources who would issue that, yes, and don't they have a website also? I would imagine, posting it on the website would be immediate.
Or should be on the website.
I mean, to wait for Thursday for the newspaper, it's not quick enough.
That's a good
Yeah, you
idea.
should be able to check where you're clamming.
That's a good idea. No, exactly.
And
Tide's right. Okay.
Yesterday's Island. It's the tourist paper.
Yeah, yesterday's island.
My friend does a lot of clamming. I don't know that he even knows that things get closed or how to find it out.
Right. I that's why I'm asking. I would know.
He wouldn't know where to look.
No.
So we may need some public education and awareness on this also.
Yep.
That it is important too, as Dave said. Yeah, that it is important because you can
Okay.
get sick.
Maybe if we can get maybe when we get a closure this year, we can get the paper to write a little article about closures
Well, they have to, if it's a, these closures that I'm talking about are historic closures. From Brand Point to Boston Avenue. Okay, that's a historic closure. It's got, Hither Creek, from the mouth of Hither Creek is closed.
Just for the record, where's Boston Avenue?
I'm sorry?
Just for the record, where is Boston Avenue?
Oh, it's, you know where you go to the boat rack by Gershner's on Monomoy?
Okay,
Right there.
all right.
But you're talking about-
Nantucket-
you're talking
Nantucket
about-
used to be-
Periodic, I'm more concerned about periodic closures. How does someone find out if there's a?
Well,
closure Because of,
the state automatically publishes in the newspaper. Because it's a state closure.
but they have to know to look at a little,
Well, that's
I mean, how
that's
in
to
the
your
world
point.
you're
That's
gonna
to,
look at, I don't read the.
no, that's a good point. But that immediately then should be put up on the website. It should be announced at the selectmen's meeting. Those are you pull out all the stops because you certainly don't want anybody to. And they're usually very short. They're usually 3 to 5 days.
Does JC post something at Children's Beach on a sign there about closures? I think he pointed at it to me
Closures
once.
should be posted at Children's Beach. They should be posted on that.
But there's a lot more
board
access
in
points.
Nantucket. It should be that's. But there again, to what we're all saying is, nobody's going to. The majority
news
of
to
the
look
guys
at.
not going to look at that.
Then we go clamming today.
But I'm gonna follow up on this in big fashion.
All right, Dave, you're filling up your plate.
Well,
Thank you.
It's now got.
No, it's important.
No,
yeah.
and if I hadn't just gone through this thing with the fair last week, I couldn't believe what I had to go through.
Did you have to have mechanized refrigeration?
No, I had ice.
Okay.
I had lots of ice.
Yeah. Usually they want to see mechanized refrigeration.
I know. Well, the health department came by, and I had 160 pounds of ice, but because I'm afraid, I don't want anybody to get sick.
No. All right. Well, is this a goal and objective or a to-do list for Mr. Franzuto?
Doesn't matter. Whatever. I'm gonna.
Say what it is, and then I'll pull it out of the minutes and put it in there if that's what we want.
I'm gonna eat this one up.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Let's see what Dave finds out first, and we'll keep it. We'll keep it in the looms. If it becomes something that requires more action and more activity from us, we'll add it to the list.
To what you said earlier, or Mr. Chairman, what you said, is posted at the Marine Department, posted at Children's Beach, posted on that information board at both the boat ramps in Nantucket. That's where it was posted. But
it's not posted out at the horse shed. It's not posted. It's not posted anywhere where someone who might go.
and it should be in Pacoma.
It should be, but it can't be. It can't be at the places where you actually go and dig, which someone could miss all those things.
Yeah.
Easily miss all those things. Take his kids, go dig clams, come home, and then turn green because they're throwing up.
Yeah.
And they missed all the things because it's very easy to miss all those things. You have to be looking for that. You really have to look for the thing in the paper. If you don't see it, you're gone. And
Good point.
it has to be. Maybe it could be on. Maybe if there's a closure, then there's a way through the visitor center to send out a bulletin to all of the lodging establishments. And they always have a bulletin board or something in those lodging establishments saying what's happening.
So visitor services.
And also the radio station. There is the Natural Resources Department regrets to say that there was a closure of the shellfish bed at XYZ RIP or whatever.
Yep.
So that it's
And I
all
could-
to cover your. I guess it's all to cover your butts. It's someone who's at the meeting saying, "I didn't know about this, and look what this did to me." And well, sorry, sir, but we did. I don't know. How
And
it
the
works.
town has its own
Right.
public service radio station, so it should be on there. That's what we're gonna make happen. So we'll work on this one.
You need a license to soft shell clam?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's covered under your.
So there's a list of phone numbers where a mass text could be sent out or something of that sort to
Because you give your phone number.
everybody who has a license
Well, that's a
can
good
be
point.
notified.
But you don't have to give your number when you get your license. You just pay your fee, and they give you the paper and the tag. But we could make that we could try and make that a policy change.
Well, if it was a big enough issue, the sewer break last year thankfully happened in the winter. So, but if you had something like that happen this time of year, which would be catastrophic for this island, you would saturate all this, and then you would probably do a reverse 911 call, which calls every single number. There's the app I have on my phone that we set up, Ping 4. You would set out a Ping 4 notice, which the only problem with Ping 4 is you have to be a subscriber, but you get the notice that there would be a shellfish closure. But those are all things that we should come up with for our toolbox to give to natural resources that says, this is what you need to be doing if there's a closure. And then we'll work on the notification and publishing of the current closures. But we think this is what you need to do if you've got a catastrophic
Short-term
issue.
Yeah.
Well, when we had that closure the year before last, during scallop season, that was basically everywhere. It was like scalloping's closed.
Right.
And it was mostly the paper.
But no offense to how they did that, but try doing that in the summer.
Right.
See, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's why Ping 4 is so we work Ping 4 and the reverse 911 and all that's code red is what I was looking for. There's a program in Barnstable County that we subscribe to that you can just saturate everybody's phone with this information when you have something bad happens, like a blizzard or something like that. But you could do it for this. The problem is, it's why we have sirens, and everybody laughs about the sirens. The sirens are not there for Nantucket people, and that's the only way I was able to sell it. The sirens aren't there for Nantucket people. The sirens are there for the 3 guys on the beach from New York who say, what the hell is that noise? And they go, it was a siren. Well, what does it mean? I don't know. Call 911. Then they tell them what the problem is, okay? There's you can't use the water in Wisconsin because of contamination. You got a shellfish closure, whatever. But it's not, the informational stuff. Nantucket are the most resilient, resourceful people on the planet. It's the guy from Connecticut days. No offense. You're from New Jersey. I read a big thing about Barnegat the other day.
Well, this time of year, it's just unpredictable. You don't know what kind of, it could be a group of young guys sitting around drinking. They decide they want to create their own clam bake and go out and dig them. None of them have a license. None of them know anything. These things happen, and I think our mission on this is to be proactive and
I think it's deserving of a line item then. I mean, it sounds like we're building into something here, so it probably ought to be a line item on this.
tentatively. We'll see what Dave finds out, because there may be more out there than we know
And I
as
think
far as implemented
closure
already.
Protocol, be a great line.
All right.
Let me dig a little bit.
Next item, stormwater runoff. And
Leave it.
Yeah, it's gotta just stay there.
yes, I mean, it's definitely high on our list, and it's slowly being addressed. It's on their radar. We have, made it, we have, I believe, given some awareness from our end of things. As far as the use of ice melt goes, I really feel something could go further with the salt use and the ice melt. Every storefront owner is using it. The town itself is doing every sidewalk in town with an ice melt. I've seen pre-treating taking place, which we never had here before, with the salt. on the streets, and it's, of course, not just salt, it's calcium chloride coated salt. It's, in a way, it has been kind of disregarded, probably because of liability issues. But this is something, Nantucketers are just not used to the salt use, and we're getting used to it now. Unfortunately, we always used sand, and then it would snow some more, then they got to put more sand down. Are our streets a mess afterwards? Certainly they're a mess. Are they still dangerous? Yes. You slow down, but you get proper tires, but that's where we can't expect that of everybody. And Rob is from a town, Mr. McNeil of the DPW, where salt is used prevalently, and I just keep thinking of the signs you pass in Wareham when you're going by those cranberry bogs, and a sign on the highway says low salt use because of it's a reservoir area.
Yep.
Well, our entire island's our reservoir area, and this is kind of a ball I've dropped, because simply out of discouragement. What would be better suited would be some research into alternative products, such as I've heard of a place in Canada just over the border from northern Vermont, New Hampshire, that uses a corn product. Maybe there's some research that could be done. When I brought this up, when Dr. Boyce was here, even he spoke with Sarah Oaktie about it, and at the time they were like, we have bigger fish to fry. We were still working on pushing for sewers in Monomoy and Shimo, and they were just working on fertilizer regulations at the time, and those were the bigger fish to fry. And here we're still spreading salt and ice melt, and I had picked up one of those bags of ice melt that the town was using. It's called Atomic Ice Melt. There's seven elements in it, and Dr. Boyce took it home and he said, these 7 elements are naturally found in the ocean. We probably don't have too much to worry about. But we all know, you take 7 elements and boil them together into something else. We don't know exactly what they are. And the front of the bag said safe for the environment, and in the back of the bag it says harmful if swallowed. And I'm thinking, well, which side of the bag do I believe here? And when I see pre-treatment going on, and 9 times out of 10 when they call for snow here, we get rain, so all that pre-treatment is immediately being flushed into the harbor, and now who's swallowing it?
Yeah.
So if it's harmful if swallowed to whoever's reading it, how's it harmful to the little critters that can't read? So here again, it's more research, and I wish we had a secretary on payroll who could sit at the desk and find out get these answers for us. But if anybody's browsing around looking for something to do, I'd love to find out an alternative product, what they use in Canada. I had heard this when I was living in Whitefield, New Hampshire, so just over the border is what, Quebec maybe, I'm not sure, but I heard just over the border they were using a corn product because of the salt killing all the roadside vegetation. So anyhow, back to stormwater runoff. It's something that should be on our radar, something that we continue to push for improvements on. We know that there's major improvements need to be done. This is on the Land Council's radar also, and I'm just hoping that we see some action take place. It needs to go from the radar to some planning and some action. And I suppose the first step is to ask, Mr. McNeil, what's in the pipeline, no pun intended. So that's certainly something I could do. I have direct contact with Mr. McNeil. He says, please ask him anytime, any question. So I'll be glad to get an update on stormwater runoff and stormwater improvements.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Maybe we should invite Rob to a meeting.
Mm-hmm. Which he said he's glad to come to a meeting. He does a lot of meetings. He does a lot of stuff. I hate to really bug him unless we really, can cover a lot of bases with him and not have to ask him to come back.
But I'm sure he has he probably knows quite a bit about the ice melt problem and the drainage issue, so.
And
For
we want-
15 minutes, we could at least get a lot of information from him.
Well, I think you'll find that as far as ice melt and salt goes, he's a firm believer in using it. That's part of his protocol. He needs to keep our streets clear for safe passage, our sidewalks clear for safe passage. That's his job. And this is the product that's at hand to use. It's the most convenient. Every one of the guys who work for him and us that are applying this have gone to state programs on how to apply it. And really the state has, for lack of a better term, brainwashed all municipalities to be using calcium chloride coated salt. And I don't think there's any activity in searching for alternatives. This is the product to use. This is the product they intend to use until we push for something else. Rob is not the one who delivered it here. The previous director, who was only here for several years, started using it mixed in with sand. Mr. McNeil is actually in the process, I believe, of converting an older fire department pumper truck into a brine truck. So now we'll see, like we see on the highways off island, pre-treating with a liquid salt brine. And I'm having a hard time swallowing this change, and because I just have a gut feeling it's not good for our environment. It's as simple as that. The downtown area, every bit of the downtown area washes into the harbor. Every single bit of it. And the pre-treating that went on, I even saw private contractors spreading on as far up as around my place, Vestal Street and to Main Street, literally just covering the island's roads with salt. So for me, it's been a peeve. It's one that I've kind of, like I say, dropped the ball on, but some more information would certainly be good on alternative products. So stormwater runoff is certainly a high priority as far as I'm concerned for the entire downtown area. And wherever runoff pipes come from, we know that they come as far as Pleasant Street, all the way down to the Consu Spring area, Washington Street extension. So that parking lot, Dave, is that true? That parking lot up on Pleasant Street where the bus shelter used to be? Yeah.
Yep.
Drains all the way down to Washington Street extension.
Yep, that's why we put a big stormwater filtration system.
Orange Street storm drains drain down to under, the town parking lot and out into Washington Street, the outfall pipe there. And as, of course, we know there's outfall pipes at the Nantucket Yacht Club and Easy Street.
There's 52 of them
52 outfall pipes.
downtown.
Wow.
52 outfall.
Wow. I don't really want to believe that number, Dave, but
Tracy Curley mapped them and everything.
boy. Well, I wonder if Mr. McNeil has that map.
He does.
All right. If there's not any more comment on that issue, we'll move forward. Number 5.
didn't somebody
I said I
get,
would take that over, and I got Fritz's stuff, and I'll start working on that one.
and I reached out to, I was literally talking to 3 harbor masters this morning about this, about the eco-friendly roads and the dormers and the no chain and all that. So, I'll help you with that. And the 2 out of the 3 said they would come over in the fall and make a presentation as to why they're using these eco-friendly roads with no chain and how they're working. I mean, they're holding 50-foot draggers with these things off the fish pier in Chatham. But basically, all 3 of them said, if you want to protect eelgrass, that's the way to go.
I think we need to pick that up this year, and
Yep.
make sure we get some progress.
Okay, I'll help you.
Don't expect any miracles. That's a slow progress.
The administration. It's the administration. They don't want to. They don't
Not to be discouraging.
I understand what it is.
Yep.
But if we don't keep working at it. then
Oh no,
we're
you
gonna-
gotta. Yeah.
Scallop seed issues.
Well, if I can, I'm totally against any type of refinement or change to the nub regulation.
It was just, if that was mine, I put it on there. I was more or less indifferent. It's just that it's when we had the closure because of the nubs in the harbor, and Mr. Hickey came down, and the solution came up with the plastic ring, and if the scallop was larger than that, or it had a nub that was bigger than a penny, then that qualified as an adult. And at that time, Smitty got up and said, well, Mr. Hickey said this is what was going to stand for now. And Smitty got up and said, well, do you foresee that being changed? And he's like, we need to collect more data over the years. And so the only reason I put it on there is because maybe more data might come in, that's all. I mean,
Well, it's my opinion. It's just my opinion, having lived through it. I believe that it's a better regulation than what we had.
yep.
As far as a well-defined raised growth ring. It at least gives some qualifying measure to it. And we did get the state statute that was over 100 years old changed to reflect the new thing. But to your point, I'll certainly call Hickey and find out if any additional data has been gathered.
Just because there might be a scalloper in the crowd who's waiting for that time.
Okay.
I just
As
to
far
cover
as,
all the bases, we can keep it as a low
and
priority.
as far as
but
refined seed taking enforcement policy, I'm all in on that one. But let me talk to Mike and see if any additional work has been done. You know, Jeff Mercer basically, did the research, and he's now an environmental police officer for the state of Rhode Island.
Huh.
But let me talk to Mike.
But there was you remember, Dave?
I bled.
Every single fisherman was in that building in the back of the 2 fairgrounds. That was the most scalpers I'd ever seen in one place.
Right.
And
The night they threatened to burn my house down that night.
right, yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
I remember it. But
So I'm just saying
I think
that
what we have is better. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm certainly not saying it couldn't be changed. But I think it's better than what we had.
just to cover the bases. that's
Okay.
all. Not to raise it up and go after it now, but if something comes along that was better,
Good idea.
and you know how the scalpers are, better than I do.
Well, thankfully, nubs are only an issue every certain amount of years. They're cyclical. Yes.
Yeah, well, the seed taking is really the key.
Well, that's a separate issue, really. And if the nub is considered an adult at a certain size, then that's pretty cut and dry. Especially since a ring is available, a measurement device to the scallopers. Is there a measurement device?
It's 2 inches. The shell has to either be 2 inches.
Are they making their own device to measure it?
Yeah, most of the boats all have them hanging on their collar.
It's seed enforcement. He's made it pretty clear he's not accepting it. He's dumped out and he's issued fines. He's held people in for a day. He's taken catches, and because we also raised an issue about the mounding of boxes, and whether it should be stick leveled, which he's capable of doing. He allows a mounded box. There are other towns. Martha's Vineyard doesn't care what type of vessel you use, any bushel basket, how much you heap it over, it doesn't matter. It was a bigger issue, I think, when we had a much larger fleet, and concerned about overfishing. Let's let the scallopers let us know if they're having a problem. They should know what they can get away with, and this is how JC put it to me. He allows a mounded box, but when he sees a guy set his box onto the dock from the boat and the scallops just can't stay on the mound and they're falling off on the dock, he's gonna do something about it, and rightfully so. I support him on that. He's allowing a mound. It just better be tight and not stacked up looking like a skyscraper. So, it's certainly something we need to keep our ear open about, because every year has its issues with each scallop season, and I would rather be here and be a problem solver. And also be a voice for the fishermen. But if the fishermen are going to take advantage of something that's hurting themselves, then we need to get the fishermen in line. So this works both ways. This is a two-way street. We're not only supporting our shellfish warden, we want to support our fishermen, but they need to be respectful of the laws.
Right, responsible. All right, so eelgrass, we're good with land council right now?
Yes.
Are we gonna drop that one
I
off?
think so. I mean, if they need support, they'll come to us and ask for support. If they want to expand the program and see the town make an investment, I'm sure we would hear from Emily. We certainly, support the land council's efforts, and this is just a pilot program. They just did this last fall. It hasn't even been in for a year, this little patch that they've done. Here again, is it going to work? Is the water quality good enough? Has too much sand slumped off of our beaches and bluffs in the harbor, and are we getting more smothering of eelgrass beds? I'd like to see more study of that and the sediment that's falling into the harbor every time we have a storm event, and not just storm events, but mean high tides. We've had a lot of high tides.
Water's coming up. Water's coming up.
All right, I think we agreed that the fertilizer
That
was
stays.
gonna be Health and Concom. Weren't we gonna invite Health and Concom here to tell us about where they're at with the fertilizer?
It's actually Health and Natural Resources.
Oh, yeah, naturally.
Yeah, they work together on it. And this advisory committee, the Department of Health Fertilizer Advisory Committee, does that committee still exist? That's where Fritz was our liaison. If we could find out what's happening there and be able to be kept in the loop somehow with what they're doing.
All Right, when I'm talking to them about their closure stuff, I'll talk to them about that. Tara called me, she wanted to talk about something anyway, so it's a perfect time. I'll get a chance to talk to those guys.
All right, well, we heard from Sheila tonight that they're collecting a lot more sewage because gray water's being collected also. Just for, to enlighten new board members, we had a retired fisherman, maybe he's not quite fully retired, Steve Bender, was concerned about what's going on in the marina, how many people are dumping both gray water and maybe sewerage also. Had some claims that I wish he had some photos to back it up or some video. I think the only way to do it, like I told him, is to send his son out there in a little Zodiac and tool around in the middle of the night, because he claims he talked to some captains of these very large vessels out in the end and asked them what they do with their wastewater, and he said, we dump it out in the middle of the night like everybody else when nobody's looking. And it's hard to believe a captain would just come right out and say that to any old Joe walking by on the dock. But anyhow, it's certainly something, I'd love to hear about, and so would anybody else, really. It's a matter of, that's the kind of thing that you hope that people are willing to step forward and say, hey, this is what I saw, and I snapped a picture of it on my phone. Can you see this? That's really the only way we're going to get somewhere with that, unless, I think Fritz wanted to see more tablets used. Sheila only wants to add tablets during Fagawi time.
Well, it ends up being a manpower issue, but we do it during Fagawi. Boats, only within the last
This is dye tablets.
few years, we require Fagawi guys to put tablets in, so we.
If they dump their tanks, we're going to see it.
You can't issue, well, you can, but you need more people to issue a dye tablet to every boat that comes in the boat basin. Or in the mooring field, for that matter. But, a lot of things have changed. The boat basin has put in hundreds of deck drains so they can pump out any boat in any slip. Boats are not manufactured with gray water holding tanks except for the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of people who are environmentally sensitive are converting tanks to gray water tanks on these big boats. And that's why you're having an increase in the amount of gray water that she's pumping, is that more boats are holding it and now pumping it out.
But they're holding in their black tank because nobody's got the space for
They don't,
a
right.
second tank.
The
They
boats-
build them, as you said, in the newer boats, they're putting in 2, but
They're building them right in.
yeah, you never had room.
No.
before. Right, you have to go in your black tank and just cut your
I know.
capacity by, now you gotta pump out every 2 or 3 days instead of a week.
But if you look at the regulation, we prohibit the use of washing machines, we prohibit the use of dishwashers, we prohibit washing down, we prohibit several things. But until more boat manufacturers install gray water holding tanks, it's difficult to mandate pumping out gray water. We were the second federal no discharge zone in the country, so we pump a lot of sewage.
I would say that if this was still a big issue, and I'm not saying it's not, but, our main complainer doesn't seem to be complaining anymore. And maybe he ran out of energy, or maybe he just got fed up, or all of that together, or maybe we answered his questions. I don't know, it just seems.
I still think it ought to be in this list of things.
Yeah, yep.
But I just wanted to give a little bit of reasoning why we're not
Yeah.
pumping. I mean, these 6,000 gallon holding tanks, I gotta tell you, it's unbelievable.
boy.
You gotta go out there 3 and 4 times just to get them, or you end up there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because they've got guests coming for the weekend. And you gotta get that level down, so you're not up against a, $12 million mega yacht during the weekend when the owner's here. I mean, that's why she's moving so much sewage.
It's a lot of shrimp cocktail.
I'm sorry?
It's a lot of shrimp cocktail.
There's a lot of shrimp cocktail.
All right. Well, I skipped Codium for newer members, just to enlighten you on the Codium. It's its slang name is Japanese moss. It entered our harbor in the mid 70s. Populated itself quite a bit to the point where it has literally taken over an entire bend in the harbor, if not a good portion of the upper harbor also. Codium was frowned upon immediately because it would latch onto the hinge of a scallop, keeping the scallop from being able to open, killing the scallop. Recently I talked to a diver, an active commercial scalloping diver, Tim Mooney, and he claims he's finding scallops amongst that Codium up in Fifth Bend, and feels that the scallops have adapted somehow to the Codium. It certainly doesn't have the qualities that eelgrass does, and it's certainly, wherever it's sitting, it's in such large amounts that it has smothered any eelgrass that is in that area. My thoughts when I first got on board here was adding this to the list, hoping some type of program to keep it in check. I don't want to use the word eradicate because I don't think that can be done, but having, a certain time when, we give an incentive to harvest some of it out of the harbor, bring it inland for composting. I guess this, it's another one of those issues that really isn't a high priority. It barely makes low priority, I guess, after talking with some people about it. But I just remember when our harbor bottoms were total eelgrass everywhere. Didn't matter where you jumped off your boat and got your feet down to the bottom, there was eelgrass there. And I've seen this Codium washed up on the beach 18 inches thick from Fourth Point to Fifth Point, from the low tide mark right up to where the high tide brought it. And that is a lot of Codium. And when the tide comes back up again, out it washes out. And I was hoping maybe a program when a sighting like this is seen with a big beaching of Codium, maybe we could deploy a crew with a machine to be able to get it up off the beach and up above the high tide mark at least, so it could rot up on shore someplace. But probably not a program that could easily be implemented because it's not as detrimental to the health of the harbor as other things. So I'm just going to move forward there and continue with the gulls and seals, because this is something that I thought of when we were first being told by the health department about pollution in the water, nitrogen and whatnot. 70% or more is a natural occurrence beyond our control, and we can only control about 20 to 25% of what happens with our water. Nitrogen falls naturally from the sky into our water, but I've been on CO2 at times when there is so much bird excrement on the beach that you couldn't stay there. It actually packed the tread of your tires in your Jeep, and it smelled so bad you had to leave. You couldn't enjoy the beach. Seals, I've been told by a previous game warden we had here, Ed Metcalf, they eat their own weight every day. we get a lot of seals hanging out on the rocks. You know, when the tide's coming in, there's 150 pounds per bowel movement working its way into the harbor from each seal, and I was just thinking of, are there ways to maybe scare off the gulls and the cormorants that hang out on Cotu, and whether it's some type of a horn system, some way to just deter seals from coming into the jetties and into the harbor. To try to cut down on the nitrogen levels. I mean, we're doing what we can with sewerage in Shimo and Monomoy. What can we do about the sewerage from the critters and the beasts out there that probably are creating more pollution than we are as human beings in that department anyway. They're certainly not contributing to any plastic waste. So, but anyhow, just something, anybody thinks any bright ideas, I'm just throwing it out there, explaining it. This is what we were talking about several years ago. It hasn't been on our radar or much of any discussion on it at all, except for 2 winters ago, the gulls were hanging out on the town pier and made an absolute mess of it. Sheila had to have her crew pressure wash it. Of course, now we're just washing it into the harbor by pressure washing it off of the pier. And she eventually set up some strings and some foil or something to deter the gulls, and it worked. I think she connected a 2x3 board to every pylon, and she strung some string across them and hang some type of foil dangling thing that reflects and makes some noise, and it kept the seagulls away. So at least that cleared up the problem at the town pier. I don't know how the boat basin, if they have had an issue. It's usually around February, March, the birds just kind of hang out in the Washington Street and town pier area. Anyhow, that's the story behind gulls and seals being on the water quality issue description here. I don't think we have to have anything to do with scallop shells. That's been resolved. They've moved the dumping area out towards the dump. It makes sense, especially for shoulder season visitors to have that stinky pile down at Jetty's Beach. I'm glad it's not there anymore. It seems to have worked out well, hopefully. Any other comments on that?
Nope.
Bottom paint. I mean, every boat that's in the harbor is a contributor to pollution, period, as far as I'm concerned. Every single boat that is in the harbor contributes some type of pollution to our harbor. Personally, when I was using a boat, I never painted the bottom because I trailered every day because Dave said there was no room left in the harbor for moorings. So,
That's true.
I don't know what type of improvements have been made with bottom paint these days. I don't think we have any special requirements here on Nantucket for any organic bottom paint to be used or anything like that. I think we have done some encouraging with boat cleaners and solvents to be using green labeled products. I believe the boat basin encourages that or even requires that.
The blue pages.
So take that one off, bottom paint.
I mean, it's a contributor to water quality issues. I mean, but, sure, we can eliminate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And boat cleaners and solvents, if we already recommend
Mm-hmm.
and require,
I think
that should come off then if it's being done.
I think we're doing the best we can.
Sheila often gives good high recommendations for how the boat basin operates. I often have people text me to go down and look at the pretty colors in the water down there, especially when they were over this past winter when they were replacing pylons underneath the wharf cottages. I guess they were creating a lot of disturbance, and of course every one of those pylons was put in the mid-60s, and they were heavily creosoted. And personally, I feel we're paying the price for all that creosote that went in all at one time in there, and it doesn't just disappear. It's got to be lingering. And once you disturb something, as you know, it stirs it up and comes to the surface.
If you take a creosote piling out today, you can't put it back.
No.
It has to go back with CCA.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, Town Pier was built in 1976. We pulled pilings out to replace them. They were dripping creosote.
Mm-hmm.
They were 40-year-old pilings.
Mm-hmm.
They were dripping creosote. So it's there.
Mm-hmm.
You know? It's in the bottom, and it's, you know, but that's why you can't put them back in. The emergency, Mr. Chairman, the emergency
Yes.
boat ramp, aren't we working on that again to be at the end of Washington Street Extension?
That was in the minutes, yeah.
Who's we?
Well, I'm working with the new land acquisition person, Mr. Bogrand. That whole issue that night about the hard curbing that they were putting down there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a dead issue.
No, it's not.
We're working on that,
Mm-hmm.
and to establish, see if we can establish that as an emergency ramp.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still working on it.
Okay. All right. And if you could alert, I'd love to be alerted, and anybody else who's interested, that proposal came from Nantucket Island Resorts.
Right.
They own a piece of property just after Sale Seafood and the girls' dorm, lifeguard dorm.
Yep.
And he, of course, wants to dress up Washington Street Extension with brick sidewalks and granite curbing. And, I'm willing to make a compromise if he's willing to offer to put in a true pier and a ramp also. I hate to see any parking eliminated down there, and I really don't think it's necessary to have brick sidewalks and granite curbing all the way down to there. That was a working waterfront historically since the whaling days, and I can remember, as a child going down there and as a youth, and all the people who had their boats up on cradles and scraping the barnacles and painting the bottom right there in a dirt parking lot, and a lot of that's gone. A lot of that space is missing now with the filtration system put in there that needs to be redone. The wetland at work, as you're familiar with, Mr. Franzuto, and
I'm working on all those issues.
So, getting a.
I'll show him the photographs that I dug out the other day of a pile of paint. Enamel paint, boat paint, bottom paint, a pile of paint. It's probably 15 feet at the base that goes up to a pyramid. Right there. That's what we collected from that area.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it was a working, that's where we used to paint bottoms. It's not a word of a lie.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have boatyards back then.
But,
We had the one shipyard.
Mr. Franzuto, just to clarify for you, the word emergency under public boat ramp was put here kind of after the fact. I started out here when I first came on board advocating for simply another public ramp in town somewhere.
Right.
There was a house on Easton Street between the White Elephant and the Breakers. It's an $18 million house, but no dredging necessary.
Yep.
It was
Auburn
beautiful. Yes, and I think enough room for a U shape, pull in, turn around, back down.
I tell you, the way to rekindle this is with the revision, re-update of the harbor plan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an action item in the old harbor plan, and I think it ought to just, we ought to champion it, and I think it ought to just move its way up to on their priority list, that it gets investigated again as to another location. But that's the way to fight that battle, because then you get the state involvement, the state approval and everything, and you don't have to fight on the local level, or we don't want it there. So I think my recommendation would be, let's fight that battle, but we'll do it through the harbor.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But as far as an emergency ramp is concerned, half tide or better, you can launch a boat down there by sails, and half tide or better, you can launch a boat in Pulpus Harbor too, but you got to play the tide. But,
Well, when it comes time to evacuate the harbor because a storm's coming, we can't wait for the convenience of half tide.
No.
And Washington Street, I mean, no matter what the tide is, you got to be willing to back your vehicle in the water too to
well,
make it work.
If you're talking about emergency, then you put Moby mats on the beach and children's beach.
Well, and this is what we were told also. Deputy Chief Gibson was in charge of giving us the answers on this, and the Moby mats are cumbersome. They were talking about where they could put them out, and how well they, how effective they're going to be. This is why I came up with the idea of labeling it more of an emergency public boat ramp, because I was hopeful that Brant Point, right next to the boathouse, there's already a pier there. Tara didn't like that idea at all, of course, and I don't blame her. But and I thought, it's federal government land. With both you having been involved in the Coast Guard for many years, and Sheila was hoping, gosh, just dreaming maybe you two could team up and somehow twist an arm of the Fed somehow to get some access to Brant Point, at least for for emergency use only. I mean, it would benefit the Coast Guard also. I would imagine if they need to deploy in a hurry and the Children's Beach boat ramp has some type of a blockage or a holdup that keeps them from deploying in a timely fashion. But the more activity we have, we've got a lot of activity in this harbor, and there's a lot of boats out there. And I've watched events where we need to empty the harbor, and sometimes it can get ugly, and sometimes it can work, in a coordinated manner. But when you add the panic factor to things. There's a lot of times it can get pretty ugly. But I'd like to, keep this a medium to high priority,
Most definitely.
and see if we can move forward with something that can really work. Something where we have a ramp that comes to a dredged channel and true access kept open for boat launching and hauling. Our spaces are fewer and fewer where this can be done, yet we continue to add to our boating activity here. So if there's no more room in the harbor for moorings, then many more people are trailering than they used to be. We've got two ramps in Nantucket. Why don't we have two in town?
I know. There were studies done, there were plans drawn. I mean, it's just something that needs to stay on our list, and we just keep chipping away at it.
You could use the bathroom.
I've got to get.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Mr. Chairman, are we almost,
Yeah, I'd like to be.
I gotta pack.
Okay.
I gotta go to North Carolina.
All right. I'll share a quick thing on, I talked to Mr. McNeil today. see if there are any updates on hazardous waste, because I had talked to Paul Murphy a few weeks ago, our new building inspector. He's very receptive, very easy to sit down with. And Mr. Murphy mentioned to me that there was going to be a department head meeting called together by our town manager, and I applaud her for that. She had to cancel the meeting for some different arrangements, but and they have not had a meeting, but it was something called an Outwaste Summit last Thursday. Mr. McNeil said it was a big hit, lots of good questions and support for our new waste streams. We touched on hazardous waste, and we'll be holding a meeting specifically focused on hazardous waste this fall on October 17th, 6 to 8 p.m. in this room for Fairgrounds.
Well, Mr. Chairman, aren't we still gonna push for a amnesty day with Clean Harbors? I thought that was the other reason we were gonna ask McNeil to come back.
Right, and I'm sorry we didn't address that before this meeting, Dave, because you brought that to light.
Can
And
we do it August 6th?
would you like, why don't we try to just talk with Mr. McNeil first?
Okay.
You know, if he has the time to come in August 6th, we can do that. If we can encourage him to move forward with a plan, at least for that amnesty day, you know, we'll see what his thoughts are on that. I'm under the impression that he's only going to move forward with more if he's told to. You know, so our encouragement, you know, first we, like you said, we have to get him on board,
Yeah.
but then the final say has to come from the select board, I believe, for him to move forward with a plan like that.
And like I said in my email, I mean, Clean Harbors is willing to come. They just have to work with him because he has the contract, but they're willing to come and, you know,
All right.
do what we.
All right. Well, let's
we-
coordinate that,
Okay.
you and me, and we'll see if, you know, if we get Robin at the next meeting, and then we'll do so.
August 6th is the next meeting?
Well, I thought we voted to do the third Tuesday of both months.
Well,
Refresh my memory.
I
How
had
does
a
it work?
conflict on the minutes because I had recommended we do the first Tuesday and everybody agreed, but then the meeting I wasn't here, everybody agreed to the third Tuesday.
Yeah, okay.
Unfortunately, I made all my travel arrangements for the first Tuesdays, but, I mean, so I would be here for the.
Well,
first
this one can be changed. This August 6th, we can have that the 20th.
I mean, to my point, and I don't mean to be a pain about this, but I'm leaving again August 7th to go back south, so.
It's not hot enough here for you. You have to go down there.
Well,
and-
my boat's down there.
I know.
It's just, there's priorities.
Well, which works for you?
I would love to have August 6th if
Oh,
we
okay.
could do it, but I don't know what the,
fine with
I
me.
wasn't here, so I don't know what the
We just-
discussion
I don't
was.
remember why we changed it, but the 6 is fine with me.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Dave, we
just left
want
it
your
flexible.
participation, Mr.
I mean, I
Fonzuto, so,
don't mean,
yeah,
A pain in the ass.
not at all.
No.
Not at all. No, please.
I know, it's just me.
It's flexible. It's flexible.
All right.
All right.
I don't know you well enough for the obvious
Oh,
comment.
I'm terrible. I'm the first one to admit it.
He's having a good day right now, actually.
Did any of you guys attend the forum on sea level rise?
Yeah.
All right, I'm not going to really get into that right now. There's a lot to think about there. It's huge, and the projections are grim at best. So I'd like to hope that the projections are exaggerated, but unfortunately, you know, what I'm more concerned with is the scare factor. There was a 24-year-old girl gave a presentation, and the first thing she started saying was how storms are more intense and more frequent, and you know, the most intense storm we've had recently, you know, aside from the no-name storm in '91, now, then you have to go back to Hurricane Esther of 62 or Carol of 58. And I hate for people to think that every storm's going to be the doozy and we got to run for cover and leave the island, because it's really, that hasn't proven itself, at least here. Maybe in the Gulf Coast in Florida it has, but it has not here.
We didn't have that.
But anyhow, last night at the Shellfish Association meeting, Ron Shepard, a good old seasoned retired scalloper, he brought in a man named Roger Warner from Ipswich. And they have been studying and trapping green crabs. Actually, Ipswich and several other towns are giving a subsidy to fishermen. Ipswich gives a 40 cents a pound subsidy to fishermen to fish green crabs. Seafood companies are scared of the consequences of green crabs. Freeport, Maine has lost 70% of its soft shell clams due to green crabs, they're claiming. A lot of studying has been done. It sounds like they're a very aggressive predator. Now, Emily Molden is studying them. Carl Sherwin just pulled his traps out yesterday, I guess. Ron went with him. His traps are inundated.
We used to trap them. We used to.
There are uses being created. There's a green crab cookbook out. There's people looking into extracting certain elements from the green crab for healing purposes, and you know, they're good for fertilizer. It's a matter of these businesses actually getting off the ground and fishermen being enticed to fish the green crab. You know, hopefully, you know, it works in all different factors. This guy gave me his card. Like I say, he's from Ipswich, greencrab.org. A previous member, Mr. Kuntz, was very interested and concerned about the green crab, and to have this brought up at the Shellfish Association, I found it quite interesting. Mr. Warner had a great amount of information, and
Was Tara at that meeting last night?
no, but there's a girl, Peter, do you know, who's the girl named Emily that's been with the Mariah Mitchell Association?
Emily Goldstein.
Okay.
She's no longer with them, but yeah.
Right, but and who's she with now, though? Because she's still at the NSA. She's very involved. She's at every meeting.
She's with her husband and her baby now. That's why she quit. Because
Okay.
She can spend more time.
All right,
She's
but it sounded
not
like
affiliated.
she's still involved with something and doing some studying with Emily Molden. So
Yeah, she might be somehow involved, but last I heard, she was no longer with the Mariah Mitchell Association because of wanting
All
to
right.
be with her family. But
all right.
Vincent's the one who works for her husband,
Well,
works for NRD.
Emily Goldstein, Carl Sherwin, and Emily Molden will be collaborating.
She may be working with the Land Council in a capacity I'm not aware of. But
All right. But maybe that can be somewhere on our list of, you know, predators. Yes. Seeing as it's running late here, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
All in favor?
Aye. Trying to set records here.
Thanks,
All the
guys.
meetings.
This is productive.
Here,